I stood at the edge of my own dining room, the broom heavy in my hands, as my daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and said, "Your job is cleaning, not eating." The silver clinked, the turkey steamed, and not one person looked up. After 32 Thanksgivings, after raising her husband from diapers to degrees, I was handed silence and crumbs. Tomorrow, at the reading of the will, she'll find out this house, and everything in it, was never hers to claim. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. I stood motionless, my champagne glass steady only because I refused to let it shake. The rooftop lights shimmered above us, the Dallas skyline gleaming like nothing had just shattered. "To Rita, the leech of our house," my daughter-in-law called out, her voice sweetened by champagne and cruelty. Laughter followed, sharp and scattered. My son didn't flinch. He raised his glass. After decades of building this company, after giving them the very roof over their heads, I was no longer his mother. Just the mother-in-law they mocked in public. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The rooftop glowed with gold light from the city skyline, a December wind tugging at the linen-draped tables. Strings of Edison bulbs stretched across the open air, giving the party a glossy, curated feel. Laughter rose in pockets, clinking glasses echoed against the night, and the hired jazz trio smoothed over awkward pauses between small talk. Rita Langston stood near the edge, champagne flute in hand, a quiet silhouette against the Dallas skyline. At 66, she blended into the crowd not through sparkle, but through stillness. Black silk dress, her late husband's old watch snug against her wrist, and that small, knowing smile she'd perfected years ago. She was listening more than speaking, watching faces that thought they weren't being watched. The microphone screeched once, pulling every eye toward the stage. Tiffany Langston, flawless in a sequined emerald gown, waved dramatically like she was stepping onto Broadway. "All right, everyone," she trilled, her voice buttery with just enough edge to suggest she'd been rehearsing. "It's that time of the night, the annual holiday roast. You know the drill, no one's safe, so grab your drinks and brace yourselves." Applause scattered, a few nervous chuckles. Rita caught Monica's eye across the room. Her attorney, her chess partner in silence. Monica's expression never broke, a small arch of her brow, a hand resting like a scalpel on the stem of her glass. The joke started harmless enough. Tiffany poked fun at Derek's inability to work a coffee machine. She teased the CFO's obsession with spreadsheets. The crowd laughed too loudly, relieved to be in on the joke instead of the target. Then she turned, pivoting with that actress's timing, and her gaze landed squarely on Rita. "And finally," Tiffany said, lowering her voice for effect, "let's raise a glass to the real legend in the room." She paused, waiting for the dramatic beat, her smile widening as if she'd been waiting all year for this line. "To Rita, the leech of our house, always around, never earning a cent." The laughter wasn't the same this time. It was thinner, hesitant, strung with the metallic sound of forced chuckles. One man barked a laugh, then caught himself, glancing down into his drink. A few women at the back shifted uncomfortably. Rita caught the shape of gasps cutting through the night like a draft of cold air. Derek, standing near the front, didn't flinch. He simply raised his whiskey glass with a lazy grin, as if he were saluting the accuracy of the remark. Pride or complicity, Rita couldn't tell, maybe both. Tiffany, sensing hesitation from the room, leaned in harder. No, I mean it. I swear she's got the best retirement gig in Dallas. Sits pretty, enjoys the view, no responsibilities. Honestly, we should all be so lucky." She let the laughter trail off, sipping from her glass, her eyes shining with victory. Rita's heart didn't race. She didn't stiffen. She smiled, a small measured curl of her lips, the kind that looked almost gracious. She lifted her glass. the stem steady between her fingers, and took a slow sip. Not a word, just that nod, dignified, detached, almost regal. The silence that followed was louder than Tiffany's joke. It traveled through the rooftop like a ripple, unsettling those who'd clapped too quickly, warming those who dared to stay quiet. From the corner, Sharon Bell muttered something under her breath to a colleague, her eyes narrowing like she was filing the moment for later dissection. Monica didn't move, didn't blink. She simply watched, her face a carved mask of stone. For a beat, Tiffany seemed unsettled by Rita's lack of reaction. But she quickly covered it with another too bright smile and launched into her closing line. The music struck up again, people dispersed. Laughter awkwardly stitched itself back together, but the fracture lingered. Rita felt it. Tiffany had expected protest, embarrassment, some display she could savor. Instead, Rita had given her nothing. And nothing was heavier than silence. The Dallas skyline winked behind them, skyscraper lights burning like witnesses. Rita set her glass down on a nearby table, her smile still present but colder now, sharpened by something only she knew. She touched the watch on her wrist, her husband's old timepiece, and whispered to herself so softly the music almost swallowed it. Time's up. The next morning, the champagne bubbles of the rooftop party had dissolved into the silence of Rita's study. The house was quiet, shadows of winter light stretching long across the oak floor. Rita sat at her desk, the same one she'd hauled from the garage 30 years earlier, back when it was cluttered with invoices and soldering irons instead of sleek contracts and glowing monitors. She ran a fingertip over the grain of the wood, and the past came rushing back. The garage had smelled of gasoline and sawdust back then, her husband's laughter echoing off the bare walls as they pieced together their first logistics platform. She had typed through the nights while he soldered connections, their breath frosting in the cold. "We'll build something that lasts," he used to say, and she had believed him, even when neighbors thought they were wasting their evenings on a hobby. He was gone now, taken too early by a heart that worked too hard. And when he passed, the company was suddenly all hers. Everyone assumed he'd been the brains, the architect. But Rita had been the one who kept the ledgers balanced, who'd seen the cracks before they widened, who signed papers when others hesitated. Quietly, surgically, she had bought out his shares, consolidating control before anyone could question whether she was capable. She never broadcast it. Not to employees, not to Derek. Certainly not to Tiffany. Silence had always been her strongest currency. Her eyes shifted to the leather-bound folder lying on the desk now. Monica had left it after the last compliance meeting, neatly tabbed with pale blue post-its. Rita opened it slowly, the pages whispering against her fingers. Balance sheets, budget projections, red ink bleeding through Tiffany's marketing initiatives, luxury influencer trips, rooftop cocktail hours, sponsorships for socialite galas. All image, no return. She leaned back, breath steady. They thought she was a ghost, a polite relic to be paraded at company events, then stored away again. But ghosts had reach. Ghosts walked through walls. A soft knock at the side door pulled her out of her thoughts. Sharon Bell stepped in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling like smoke from a fuse. Her old friend looked the same as ever. Sharp eyes, calculator mind. She set 1 mug down in front of Rita without a word, then glanced at the open reports. "Well," Sharon said finally, lowering herself into a chair. "They've been busy spending what isn't theirs." Rita nodded, pushing 1 sheet across the desk. Tiffany's signature gleamed in looping cursive at the bottom of a 6-figure campaign invoice. A champagne tower photographed for Instagram, tagged with corporate dollars. Sharon exhaled through her nose, a humorless sound. This is what happens when children play house with real money. They think branding is substance. They think the lights will always stay on. Rita sipped the coffee. It was bitter, grounding. Her eyes didn't leave the reports. Sharon leaned in, her voice soft but serrated. Ready to turn the lights back on? Rita's lips curved into that small, unshaken smile. She tapped the edge of the paper with her fingernail, each sound deliberate. Not yet. Let's pull the dimmers first. The air in the study felt charged, like the pause before a thunderclap. Rita slid another file across the desk, one Monica had drawn up years earlier. The silent trust agreement. Clean, airtight, untouchable. Her 58% stake, shielded and sharpened by the law itself. Derek and Tiffany didn't even realize how little they owned, how their grip was nothing more than cosmetic power dressed in expensive suits. From the outside, she appeared calm, an aging widow sipping coffee on a quiet Texas morning. But inside, gears had begun to turn, deliberate and unstoppable. Sharon caught the look in her eyes and leaned back slowly. God help them, she murmured. Rita didn't answer. Instead, she closed the file with a crisp snap, her husband's watch catching the slant of morning light. She whispered, almost to herself, "They've had their fun. Now it's my turn." Rita's study smelled faintly of leather and paper, the kind of room that swallowed secrets and held them like an archive. Morning had slipped into afternoon. The winter sun cast narrow bands of gold across the desk. Monica Williams sat opposite her now, posture straight, her navy suit uncreased as if she'd been carved into it. A thick binder lay open between them, its pages heavy with legal clauses and signatures that had long ago determined the future of the company. Monica tapped one page with the end of her pen, precise as a surgeon pointing to an artery. "They don't know it," Monica said, her tone clipped but calm. "But this retirement agreement left you with every inch of control that matters. Derek and Tiffany each hold 18% voting shares. The rest is yours, 58%. Silent, yes, but decisive." Sharon gave a low whistle from her seat near the bookshelves, where she'd been flipping through old ledgers like a hawk circling over prey. "They've strutted around for years thinking they had the throne," she muttered. "Turns out they've been renting the chairs." Rita folded her hands over her husband's watch, the cool metal pressing into her skin. "And yet," she said softly, "they speak to me as if I've overstayed my welcome." Monica's eyes lifted. There was no pity in them, only calculation. Respect isn't inherited, it's structured. That's why we wrote these contracts the way we did. She slid the pen along the margin of one particular section. Clause 11B. Misconduct at a company-sponsored event. What happened last night fits the definition. If you choose to enforce it, Tiffany's career ends in an afternoon. The room stilled. Sharon closed the ledger and set it down with a quiet thump. "They can't fire you," she said, her voice low and certain, "but you can fire them." For a long moment, Rita said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked, deliberate, as if marking the silence like footsteps on a hardwood floor. She let the weight of Sharon's words settle into the space. Finally, Rita exhaled. "I don't want a firing, not yet. Let's give them one last chance to speak respectfully." Sharon's brow furrowed, but she didn't argue. Monica, on the other hand, leaned forward slightly, her fingers steepling. "Rita," she said evenly, "a warning only gives them time to sharpen their knives. You show them mercy, and they'll mistake it for weakness." Rita met her gaze without blinking. Mercy is a performance, one they'll misinterpret until it's too late. A faint smirk tugged at Monica's mouth. "Then we wait, and when the rope tightens, we'll let them hang themselves with their own arrogance." Rita's smile deepened by a fraction. She turned a page in the binder, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. "Exactly. Let's give them the rope." The three women sat in the quiet hum of the study, a triangle of stillness carved into the afternoon. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, the mundane sound of life continuing, unaware of the storm gathering inside the Langston home. Sharon leaned back in her chair, arms folded, eyes sharp with anticipation. "They've been reckless in public. They'll be reckless in private too, and we'll be ready." Rita closed the binder with a snap, the sound final, like a judge's gavel striking. She rose from her chair, the silk of her dress whispering against the wood floor. At the window, Dallas shimmered in the winter sun, glass towers catching fire in the light. They think last night was just a party, Rita said quietly, almost to the city itself. But it was a contract test, and they failed. She pressed her hand lightly against the glass, her reflection staring back. Steady, unreadable, and unyielding. Behind her, Monica began gathering the papers, tucking each sheet into a leather folio. She spoke without looking up. Then we'll move to stage 2. Rita didn't turn from the window. Her smile returned, cold and deliberate. Stage 2, she repeated. And after that, there's no stage 3. The restaurant was the kind of Dallas hotspot Tiffany adored. Glass walls, leather booths, a chandelier made of sculpted steel dangling like jewelry over the dining floor. Rita had chosen it deliberately, not because she liked the food, but because Tiffany would. Let her think she was in her element. Rita arrived 10 minutes early, as always. She sat at a corner booth, a folder resting beside her menu like an accessory. The waiter poured her water, set down a basket of bread. Rita didn't touch either. She just waited, her hands folded loosely, her watch ticking like a metronome. Tiffany arrived 12 minutes late. The hostess led her across the room, heads turning at the flash of her red designer bag, the calculated sway of her heels. Tiffany didn't apologize. She slid into the booth, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Traffic, she said breezily, waving for a mimosa. Dallas drivers are hopeless. Rita smiled warmly, as if she hadn't been kept waiting at all. You wear confidence well, she said. It suits you. Tiffany smirked, pleased. Well, someone has to run things. Derek handles operations, but let's be honest. The creative vision, the branding, that's all me. People see our company differently now, bigger, sleeker. She leaned back, basking in her own glow. Rita nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. I suppose last night was part of that branding too. For the first time, Tiffany faltered, just a flicker, then recovered with a shrug. Oh, that? Just a joke. Everyone knew it. You've got to have thick skin at those roasts. The waiter arrived with Tiffany's drink. She lifted it, tapped her straw against the glass, already moving the conversation along. Besides, people love me for being bold. It keeps the energy fresh. Rita reached for the folder at her side. She slid it across the table, her nails barely making a sound on the leather. Speaking of bold, she said softly, I'd like you to look through this. Tiffany cocked her head, bemused, and flipped it open. Her eyes danced across the first page, then the second. Her smirk faded. Inside were the ownership documents Monica had prepared, neatly tabbed and annotated. Voting shares, control clauses, her own signature from years ago, scribbled without reading. At first, Tiffany skimmed, impatient. Then her gaze slowed, tracing every line as if the words were in a language she'd never seen before. Her face lost color. She reached for her mimosa, took a long sip, but the glass trembled just slightly against her lip. Rita watched her, calm as a stone in a river. I'm not firing you, she said finally, her voice smooth as silk across glass. Not yet. Tiffany snapped the folder shut, her hands betraying a tightness she couldn't disguise. What exactly is this supposed to mean? Rita leaned in slightly, her tone never rising above polite conversation. It means the lights are on. I see everything, every dollar, every report, every insult. She let the words linger, not sharp, not shouted, just undeniable. For the first time, Tiffany couldn't meet her gaze. She fussed with her napkin, smoothing it flat against the table, her breath shallow. Rita lifted her water glass, sipped, and set it down with perfect composure. Enjoy your lunch, she said. And do try to be on time next quarter's board review. Punctuality reflects seriousness. The waiter returned, menus in hand, oblivious to the frost settling over the table. Tiffany plastered on a smile, too wide, her voice pitched higher than before. I'll have the salad. Rita gave a small nod, as if the matter were already decided. as if Tiffany's order had been about more than lettuce. When the waiter walked away, Tiffany opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to bluff. But Rita stood, sliding gracefully from the booth. She left the folder behind, its weight undeniable. "Read it carefully," she said. "The contracts you never read tend to matter most." She walked out without waiting for Tiffany's response, heels clicking against the polished floor, each step steady and deliberate. Heads turned again, this time not at Tiffany, but at her. Tiffany sat frozen, the folder in front of her like a loaded weapon she couldn't disarm. The certified envelopes went out on Monday morning, cream paper embossed with Monica's law firm's insignia. Each was hand-delivered by courier to Derek and Tiffany's front door, their names typed in neat block letters above the bolded subject line. Ownership structure clarification. By noon, Rita's phone buzzed with the expected reaction. Derek's number lit up the screen. She let it ring until it went silent. In her office downtown, Rita sat with Monica and Sharon, the three of them reviewing the latest stack of reports. Sharon spread spreadsheets across the mahogany table like a battlefield map, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Red lines slashed through the columns. "Client retention is down 9% quarter over quarter," Sharon said, her tone as sharp as a scalpel. "And it's not just attrition. They're leaving because service is collapsing. Logistics errors, unanswered calls. But you wouldn't know it from the polished numbers Tiffany's team keeps publishing." Monica flipped to a flagged section, her pen circling figures. She's been padding performance metrics. The language here, engagement growth, that's smoke. Real numbers are bleeding. Rita listened, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her pulse beat steady beneath her husband's watch. "We'll let them explain themselves at the board review," she said. "Every department, no exceptions." Sharon looked up, a glint in her eye. "That's going to gut them." Tiffany's been spending her time building parties, not pipelines. Rita's smile was faint but decisive. "Then we'll see how well she performs under light." The news of the mandatory board review swept through the company like a cold wind. Tiffany holed herself in her office, blinds drawn, assistants flitting in and out with stacks of slides. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she barked instructions, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to rebuild Q4 numbers, smooth the retention dips, highlight the influencer campaign. Spin it positive. This is about optics." One of her junior staffers shifted uneasily. "But ma'am, the raw data." "Polish it," Tiffany snapped. "This isn't about raw data. It's about perception. Get me charts that glow." Behind closed doors, she slumped against her desk, flipping through the certified letter again. Her eyes kept snagging on the lines she wished weren't there. 58% controlling ownership. Rita Langston. Every word burned. 2 days later, Derek stormed into Rita's office unannounced. The letter crumpled in his hand. His jaw was tight, his suit jacket unbuttoned like he'd forgotten how to compose himself. "You blindsided us," he said, voice rising. "This letter, this review, it's excessive. You didn't need to go nuclear." Rita looked up from her desk, unhurried, her pen pausing over a set of notes. Monica sat in the corner, calm as ever, her legal pad open. "This isn't nuclear, Derek," Rita said evenly. "It's housekeeping." "We're not ready," Derek pressed, stepping closer. "Tiffany's team needs more time to—" Monica cut in, her voice cool. "If you're suggesting altering reports, be aware. Falsification is grounds for termination, with cause, and litigation." Derek's face flushed red. "That's not what I'm saying." "It's exactly what you're saying," Monica replied. He turned back to Rita, softer now, almost pleading. "Mom, just give us a little more time. 2 weeks. That's all I'm asking." Rita leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly. For a moment she studied her son as if he were a stranger across a table. She remembered the boy who once followed his father through that cold garage, eager to learn. The man before her now wore entitlement like armor. Her voice, when it came, was firm but quiet. "That wasn't a request, Derek. The review stands." the silence between them was thick, filled only by the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. Derek's jaw worked as if he wanted to argue further, but no words came. He threw the crumpled letter onto her desk and turned on his heel. When the door slammed, Sharon, who had been leaning in the doorway unnoticed, let out a low whistle. "He's rattled." Rita picked up the crumpled letter, smoothed it flat with careful fingers, and placed it back on the desk. Her lips curved into that cool smile, the one that carried no warmth. "Good," she said softly. "It means the rope is tightening." The numbers didn't lie. They never did. Monica spread the bank statements across the conference table, her pen striking neat circles around the same names again and again. High-end boutiques, spa services, a string of influencer lunches at places where the cocktails cost as much as an employee's weekly groceries. Total, $9,247, she said flatly, flipping the final page into view. All billed through the company card, none of it coded to client accounts, no approvals. Sharon, arms crossed, leaned in to skim the receipts. "And that's just 6 months?" 18, Monica corrected. She tapped another binder. Patterns consistent. Drip charges at first, then bolder. She thought no one was looking. From the head of the table, Rita sat composed, hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. Her watch ticked softly in the quiet room, each second counting down to something inevitable. The door opened. Tiffany swept in, late again, her heels cutting sharp notes against the floor. She looked polished, too polished. Hair coiled high, blazer tailored within an inch of its seams. She carried her phone like a shield. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she said with a breezy laugh, as if she were arriving to brunch with friends. "Traffic was a nightmare." Monica didn't smile. "Sit." Tiffany hesitated, glancing from Monica to Sharon to Rita, who hadn't moved. The silence unnerved her. She lowered herself into the chair, adjusting her blazer. "So, what's this about?" "I have a call with our PR team in 20 minutes. Monica slid a copy of the statements across the table. "Spa visits, designer handbags, lunches at Le Jardin, all charged to the company account." Tiffany's laugh faltered. She picked up the pages, flipped them quickly, then set them down as though they were beneath her. "Blurred categories," she said with a shrug. "These things happen. Sometimes staff meals overlap with influencer outreach. Sometimes wellness counts as—" "Stop," Sharon cut in, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. "This isn't blur, it's theft, clear as glass." Tiffany's smile tightened. "That's an exaggeration. I drive our image. That takes investment. Do you think clients care about spreadsheets? They care about appearances." Finally, Rita moved. She leaned forward just slightly, her voice calm but heavy as stone. "Appearances don't excuse arrogance." Tiffany turned to her, eyes narrowing. "And what exactly do you know about modern branding?" Rita didn't flinch. She let the question hang, the arrogance echoing back toward Tiffany like a slap. Then she spoke, her words measured and deliberate. "You blurred the line between arrogance and theft." The silence that followed was suffocating. Tiffany looked from one face to another, searching for an ally and finding none. Her fingers tapped nervously against her phone, the sound small but frantic. Monica gathered the papers back into a neat stack, her movements slow, precise. "This is a compliance meeting. Tiffany, it will be documented. If you want to contest the charges, you'll need receipts. Real ones. Otherwise, the record stands." Tiffany sat back, lips pressed thin, a flush creeping up her neck. For once, her performance faltered. Rita didn't look away. She simply studied her daughter-in-law, the way a judge studies a defendant before the verdict is read. There was no anger in her expression, only finality. Sharon broke the silence. "Pattern like this doesn't disappear on its own. It escalates." Tiffany grabbed the papers back, shoving them into a messy pile. "I don't have time for this," she snapped, standing abruptly. "You're twisting everything." Her chair scraped loudly across the floor as she stormed toward the door. But before she left, she turned, her eyes flashing. "You'll regret trying to humiliate me." Rita's reply was soft, almost a whisper. "This isn't humiliation, it's exposure." Tiffany froze for half a heartbeat, then yanked the door open and left, the echo of her heels fading down the hall. The three women remained in the conference room, the stack of receipts sitting between them like evidence at a trial. Rita lifted her champagne-colored pen, signed the compliance log Monica had placed in front of her, and closed the folder with a gentle snap. Her voice was steady, cold as winter glass. "She just gave me the next clause to pull." The door to Rita's office slammed open so hard the picture frames rattled against the wall. Derek charged inside, his tie loosened, jaw tight, fury radiating off him in waves. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my wife?" His voice cracked across the quiet room, too loud for the paneled walls that had always preferred calm conversations. Rita didn't flinch. She sat at her desk with the expense reports neatly stacked in front of her, pen aligned at a perfect angle. Monica was seated to her right, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, her face an unreadable mask. Sharon leaned against the window ledge, arms folded, eyes cool and steady. Without a word, Rita slid the stack of papers toward Derek. The receipts stared up at him, spa visits, boutiques, influencer lunches, all highlighted in neat strokes of Monica's pen. "This," Rita said, her tone even, "is what I'm doing." Derek snatched the papers, flipping through them, his face reddening as the list grew longer. "These are exaggerations," he spat. "She works harder than anyone. Those were client-building expenses." Monica's voice cut in like a scalpel. "They were theft. Policy is explicit. No personal use of company funds. She broke it. And you?" Her gaze sharpened on him. "You protected it." Derek's mouth opened, then shut. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the reports. "You're turning this into a witch hunt. Do you even realize what kind of damage you're causing? To this family, to the company?" "The company," Rita said, her voice soft but iron-heavy, "is what I built. The family is what you've been using as a shield." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ticking of Rita's watch. Derek straightened suddenly, puffing out his chest. "If this is how you want to play it, maybe you don't deserve me as COO. Maybe I should resign." Rita's eyes lifted to his, calm as ever. "Submit it in writing." The words landed like a hammer. Derek's mouth tightened. The fight in his eyes faltered. He'd expected a plea, a crack in her armor. Instead, she left him holding the threat like a dull blade that had bounced off steel. He looked down at the papers again, searching for some flaw in the ink. But there was nothing to erase what was written, nothing to soften the numbers. The knock on the door came before he could recover. 2 board members stepped in, tentative, their eyes darting between Rita and her son. "We heard raised voices," one said carefully. His gaze dropped to the stack of receipts on the desk. "Are those the reports?" Monica answered before Derek could. "Yes, and they will be entered into the record." The board members exchanged a look. One cleared his throat. "We'll need to review them ourselves." Rita gestured toward the stack with a calm hand. "Of course. Transparency benefits everyone." Derek's jaw tightened as the papers were lifted from his hands and carried out of the room like evidence seized from a crime scene. The door clicked shut behind them. Derek stood rigid, shoulders squared, but eyes betraying panic. Sharon finally spoke, her voice dry, almost pitying. "He was never a leader," she said, not even addressing him directly, just loud. Derek spun toward her, but Rita's quiet voice cut across the room before he could erupt. "This isn't about volume, Derek. It's about vision, and you've been blind for a long time." He stood there, chest heaving, but no words came. He looked smaller than he had when he barged in, deflated by the weight of paper and silence. Rita leaned back in her chair, her fingers brushing against her husband's watch. She spoke softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "Leadership isn't claimed. It's proven." The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel, the Dallas skyline gleaming behind it like a jury of towers. A long mahogany table stretched down the center, polished so smooth it reflected the harsh overhead lights. Rita sat at its head, serene, hands folded over her husband's watch. Monica stood at her shoulder with a folio of documents, every page tabbed, highlighted, and waiting. The chairs filled slowly, leather squeaking under the weight of uneasy men and women who sensed the meeting would not end quietly. Derek strode in first, jaw locked, Tiffany trailing behind him like a storm contained in sequins and perfume. They took their seats opposite Rita, their smiles brittle and performative. Rita tapped the table once with her fingernail. The room hushed. This emergency session is called to order. Monica opened the folio and began distributing copies. Before you, you'll find the compliance reports, transaction records, and supporting evidence of policy violations committed under the marketing division. Her tone was sharp, professional, every syllable clean enough to cut. The charges include unauthorized spending, falsified reporting, and misuse of corporate assets. Tiffany let out a derisive laugh. Oh, please. We're really going to waste everyone's time with receipts for lunches? Monica didn't look at her. The pattern totals nearly $10,000 of misappropriation over 18 months. That's not lunch. That's theft. One board member shifted in his chair, adjusting his glasses. Another leaned forward, studying the highlighted figures with narrowed eyes. Rita said nothing. She simply watched. When the murmurs began to ripple around the table, Monica raised her voice just enough to be heard. In accordance with our bylaws, I motion for a vote to remove Tiffany Langston from her role as Vice President of Marketing, effective immediately. The words hung heavy, like the click of a lock on a steel door. Derek shot to his feet. Absolutely not. You can't. You're out of order, Monica said smoothly, her hand already sliding to a page in the bylaws. Section 14B. Conflict of interest. You are both her husband and COO. You do not have standing to block the motion. Derek's mouth opened. But the claws in black and white glared up at him from the copy in front of his chair. He sank back down, fury tightening his face. The first vote came quickly. Yes. A second followed. Yes. The third board member hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Tiffany's smile faltered, her nails tapping furiously against the tabletop. You're making a mistake. You need me. The fourth vote tipped it. Yes. 4 of 6. The majority. Silence stretched across the room, punctuated only by Tiffany's shallow breathing. She shot to her feet, her chair screeching against the polished floor. You'll regret this, she spat, eyes blazing at Rita. You think you've won something here? You don't know what regret is. Rita rose slowly, her expression calm as glass. I never regret subtraction. The words landed like a verdict. Tiffany grabbed her bag and stormed from the room, the echo of her heels carrying long after the door slammed shut. Derek sat frozen, his face a storm of disbelief and humiliation, staring at the space where his wife had been. Monica gathered the signed votes, tucking them neatly into her folio. The motion carries. Tiffany Langston is removed from her position, effective immediately. All eyes turned back to Rita. She let the silence stretch, controlling it as easily as she controlled the air she breathed. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but resonant. In the interim, she said, Sharon Bell will resume duties as Chief Financial Officer. Effective today. Sharon inclined her head slightly, her expression one of steely acceptance. I'll clean the books. The board members exhaled, tension thick in their breaths. Derek looked between them, his mouth opening as if to argue, but no sound came. He seemed smaller under the fluorescent light, as though the title QO had shrunk around him like a suit 2 sizes too big. Rita sat back down, folding her hands once more over her watch. The skyline glowed behind her, winter sun bouncing off the towers, as if the city itself bore witness. The rope had tightened again, and this time it left a mark. The boardroom was still humming from Tiffany's stormy exit when Sharon asked for access to the compensation files. She didn't waste time with polite language. She simply pulled the folder from the CFO's drawer as if it already belonged to her. By the next morning, she was in Rita's office, glasses perched low, a yellow highlighter marking up lines of payroll data. "Here," Sharon said, stabbing the page with her pen. "These bonuses, special project incentives, they aren't approved anywhere. No board minutes, no contracts. Derek's been cutting himself checks." Rita leaned forward, scanning the highlighted lines. Numbers glared back. Extra deposits every other quarter, tidy enough to pass casual inspection, but heavy enough to add up. "How much?" Rita asked quietly. $124,000 in 2 years, Sharon said flatly. "And that's just what I found before coffee." The weight of the figure hung between them. Rita's watch ticked steadily, as though marking time against the theft. Monica arrived a few minutes later, summoned by a single text. She swept into the office in her navy suit, legal pad already in hand. Sharon slid the file across the desk. Monica's eyes moved quickly, her pen scratching notes into the margins. "These aren't mistakes," she said, voice even. "This is deliberate. He coded them as performance bonuses for projects that don't exist. And look." She tapped one page, her finger landing on a looping signature at the bottom. Tiffany signed off, authorized every payment. Rita sat back, her face unreadable. She had expected arrogance, even incompetence. But fraud. This was wrought at the foundation. "HR," she asked. Monica nodded once. "I already called them. No oversight, no approvals from the board." Everything funneled through Tiffany's desk. She closed the file, her eyes locking with Rita's. "It's airtight. This is theft, not just ethical failure, legal liability." For a long moment, Rita was silent. Then she exhaled, slow and deliberate. Let the lawyers finish the job. By Thursday, Monica had built the framework for a civil recovery case. Her office was a war room, files stacked in color-coded towers, deposition outlines pinned across a corkboard, statutory language highlighted in thick ink. She explained it to Rita with surgical precision. "Fraudulent enrichment, unjust compensation. We'll file for restitution. With the board on notice, suspension is immediate and non-negotiable." Rita listened, her calm unbroken, as Sharon paced the room like a general readying troops. "They'll try to spin this," Sharon warned. "Derek will say it was a clerical oversight. Tiffany will call it performance pay. But the numbers don't lie. They never do." Monica closed her folio. "The vote is the next step." The emergency board meeting was shorter than the last. The evidence spoke louder than debate. Monica laid the compensation files on the table, each tab color-coded. Overpayments totaling $124,000 without board approval, authorized by Vice President Tiffany Langston. Beneficiary, COO Derek Langston. The board members didn't fidget this time. They leaned in, eyes narrowed, pens scratching notes. The silence wasn't discomfort. It was calculation. Derek sat stiffly at the far end, his jaw tight, his hands clasped together so hard his knuckles whitened. "This is ridiculous," he said finally, his voice sharp but strained. "Those bonuses were for projects I led. Efficiency improvements, operational expansions." Sharon cut him off, her tone dry. "There are no records of those projects. You padded your salary, plain and simple." Monica pushed a document across the table. "Here are HR's confirmations. No oversight, no approvals, no projects. Just your signature, and your wife's." The room stilled. One board member cleared his throat. "We've heard enough." He looked toward Rita. "What's your recommendation as chair?" Rita's eyes moved slowly from the faces around the table to her son. Derek's gaze was locked on hers, defiant but hollow. For a moment, she saw the boy who once asked her how to balance a checkbook, who had carried lunchboxes into the garage where she and his father built something out of nothing. That boy was gone. Her voice was steady. "Suspend him. Effective immediately. Let the lawyers proceed." The gavel of consensus came quickly, hands raised, 5-1. Derek shot up from his chair, voice cracking with fury. You can't do this to me. I am this company. Rita stood too, her presence silencing the room. She looked at him with eyes that no longer saw her son, but a liability. You were never the company, Derek. You were a passenger, and you tried to steal the wheel. The board secretary's pen scratched the minutes into permanence. Derek stood frozen, his chest heaving, eyes darting wildly as though searching for an escape hatch. There was none. The building felt different the next morning. The lobby, usually hushed under a thin film of anxiety, buzzed with cautious curiosity as Rita Langston stepped through the glass doors. She wasn't escorted by Derek. She didn't drift in for a holiday toast. She walked with purpose, her heels steady against the marble. Her presence so unexpected that heads lifted from desks and whispers rippled down the hallway. Rita didn't veer toward the executive floor. She started at the warehouse operations level, where fluorescent lights buzzed and employees hunched over monitors, tracking shipments and routing trucks. A few froze as she appeared in the doorway, unsure if they were supposed to stand. Good morning, Rita said, her voice calm but warm. I'm Rita Langston. Some of you know me as Derek's mother, but you should also know I co-founded this company. And starting today, you'll be seeing more of me. The room exhaled. A young coordinator with tired eyes glanced at his coworker, then raised his hand hesitantly. Are you taking over? Rita smiled gently. Not taking over, taking back. A ripple of relieved laughter followed, small but genuine. Someone clapped quietly, and just like that, the ice cracked. By lunchtime, Rita had toured 3 more departments. In customer support, she shook hands with reps whose complaints about burnout had gone unheard. In IT, she asked questions that executives never bothered with. What tools made their jobs harder? What deadlines felt unrealistic? The employees answered cautiously at first, then with relief, as if a valve had been opened. Word spread fast. By afternoon, Monica's inbox pinged with anonymous testimonials, reports of Tiffany's screaming fits, of Derek's dismissals, of credit stolen from junior staff. Words like hostile and toxic repeated themselves across paragraphs. Monica forwarded them to HR with a 2-word note. Begin investigation. In the finance wing, Sharon sat with a fresh spreadsheet open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Numbers reshaped themselves under her keystrokes, columns bending into new truths. Rita stood behind her, watching the work take form. The marketing excess is gone, Sharon explained. I've rerouted the budget, restoring the employee scholarship fund, rebuilding the relief pool. Quietly, for now, Rita nodded, her eyes on the screen. Good. Let's give back what they stole, without fanfare. The staff will notice where it matters. Sharon smirked, not looking up. They already have. Someone just sent coffee to my desk with a note that said, "Thank you for fixing the books." Rita allowed herself the smallest laugh. Then let's keep fixing them. By late afternoon, she returned to her office, weary but charged. The energy of the building had shifted. Heads lifted when she passed, not in fear, but in something closer to trust. For the first time in years, the staff wasn't looking over their shoulders. They were looking forward. Monica entered with a new stack of papers. HR has opened the culture investigation. Early reports are damning. It will give the board even more leverage. Rita took the papers but didn't read them yet. Instead, she walked to the window, gazing out at the Dallas skyline, the city humming under its winter haze. They thought the company was theirs to decorate, Rita said softly. But they never understood it was built from the ground up, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. The staff were never theirs to command, only ours to serve alongside. Monica placed a hand lightly on the desk. You've shifted morale in one day. Imagine what we can build in 1 year. Rita touched her husband's watch, feeling its weight. We're not imagining, we're starting now. Behind her, Sharon entered with another report, this one marked in red. She set it on the desk, her eyes sharp. And while you're rebuilding, Rita, the storm isn't over. Derek's not going down quietly. Rita turned from the window, her face calm, her resolve unshaken. Then let him rage. Every move he makes is another nail in his own coffin. The papers sat waiting, numbers, testimonies, evidence. But beneath them, Rita felt the company itself, breathing differently now. And for the first time in years, she knew it was alive again. The summons arrived in a thick envelope, the kind lawyers like to send to make a point. Rita opened it at her kitchen counter, the winter sun spilling across marble. The words leapt from the page: breach of succession promises, emotional distress, damages sought. $3.2 million. Derek's signature scrawled across the complaint, his lawyer's letterhead stamped in bold. It read less like a legal case and more like a tantrum dressed in legalese. Monica read it beside her, coffee cooling untouched. She skimmed once, twice, then set the pages down with a dry laugh. They're suing you for not handing them the crown they imagined. Rita folded the letter neatly back into its envelope. Then let's remind them who built the throne. By the end of the week, Monica had drafted a response, 300 pages of precision, fraudulent payments, unauthorized expenses, mismanagement reports, employee testimonials describing harassment and negligence. Each tabbed section was another nail hammered into Derek's coffin. When she presented it to Rita in the law firm's conference room, Sharon leaned across the table, flipping through with sharp satisfaction. "This isn't a response," she said. "It's an obituary." Rita didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Good. Let them see what they buried themselves with." The press release went out the next morning, signed with Rita's name. It was short, steady, and impossible to twist. "Our company is committed to integrity. Every decision is guided by transparency, accountability, and respect for the people who built this firm from the ground up. That will not change." The statement rippled outward within hours. By noon, a Dallas business journal carried the headline across its homepage: "Founder's Widow Cleans House." The article chronicled the board votes, Tiffany's removal, Derek's suspension. Photographs showed Rita stepping into the building, shaking hands with junior staff, her presence calm but commanding. The piece called her a quiet matriarch correcting a corporate freefall. Phones in the office buzzed with notifications. Employees shared the article in hushed excitement, some even posting it to LinkedIn with captions like, "Finally, leadership with backbone." 2 days later, Monica walked into Rita's office carrying a single sheet of paper, far lighter than the stacks she'd been bringing for weeks. Her expression was sharp but satisfied. "Derek's lawyer has withdrawn," she said simply, laying the notice on Rita's desk. "Officially, no explanation given." Rita traced a finger over the line, her pulse steady. Even attorneys don't like losing causes. Sharon, standing in the doorway, added with a smirk, "or unpaid invoices." The three women shared a brief silence, not celebratory, but resolute. Another battle finished, another front secured. Later that evening, Rita found herself back in the building. The sun had long set, but the office still glowed. As she walked through the corridors, she noticed clusters of employees gathered near break rooms and copy machines, their voices low but energized. When they saw her, they didn't look away. They smiled, nodded. Some even clapped quietly as she passed. By the time she reached her office, Monica was waiting with her laptop open. "You need to see this." On the screen was a digital petition, anonymous but swelling fast. "Keep Rita Langston as permanent chair." Hundreds of signatures already, each one carrying a short comment. "She listens. She respects us. She saved the company from them." Rita scrolled through, her throat tightening despite herself. These weren't just numbers, they were voices. Voices she'd fought to give oxygen back to. She set the laptop aside and looked out at the city lights glittering across Dallas. "They deserve more than survival," she murmured. "They deserve to thrive." Monica closed the laptop with a soft click. And now they know who's going to get them there. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning. Rita was in her office reviewing Sharon's latest budget corrections when her assistant stepped in, holding the line on mute. HR from Sterling Logistics, the assistant whispered. They want to verify Tiffany Langston's employment record. Said she's being considered for a senior marketing role. Rita's gaze lingered on the city skyline beyond the glass, so Tiffany was already scrambling for a new perch. Predictable. She gestured for the call to be transferred to Monica's line. Monica answered crisply, her voice smooth as glass. This is Monica Williams, Counsel for Langston Systems. How may I help you? A young man's voice filtered through the speakerphone, polite but cautious. We're finalizing a background check for Ms. Tiffany Langston. We'd like to confirm her dates of employment, job title, and whether she's eligible for rehire. Monica's lips curved, not in humor but in precision. We'll respond in full, legally, factually. She ended the call with professional courtesy, then turned to Rita. They asked the right question. Now they'll get the right answer. By afternoon, Sterling's HR inbox held a formal letter on law firm letterhead. It was as dry as a desert, every word stripped of embellishment. Ms. Tiffany Langston served as Vice President of Marketing from 2018 until her removal by board vote in December of this year. She was terminated with cause for policy violations, including misuse of company funds and falsification of internal reports. Supporting documentation attached. 23 pages of receipts, compliance notes, and signed board minutes followed. No commentary, no malice, just the truth. Sharpened into something that cut deeper than rumor ever could. 2 days later, Sharon burst into Rita's office, her grin uncharacteristically broad. She tossed a folded newspaper onto the desk. Sterling rescinded the offer, effective immediately. Guess they didn't appreciate having a thief in their C-suite. Rita unfolded the paper. A small business column carried the headline, Sterling walks back VP appointment amid compliance concerns. Tiffany's name glared from the page, stripped of its gloss, reduced to a cautionary tale. Sharon leaned against the desk, arms crossed. She wore designer, Rita. Now she wears clearance. For the first time all day, Rita allowed herself a laugh. Not cruel, but final. That night, as Rita settled into her living room, her phone buzzed on the side table, a text from an unknown number. You're destroying our family. The words glowed in the dark, venom disguised as pleading. Rita stared at them for a long time, her thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't need to ask who had sent it, Derek or Tiffany or both. It didn't matter. The voice behind it was desperation, not authority. Her hand drifted to her husband's watch. The metal was cool, grounding. She whispered into the quiet room, not for the sender, but for herself. They destroyed themselves. I'm just holding up the mirror. She didn't reply. She simply set the phone face down. The message silenced, her resolve unbroken. The audit arrived in a leather-bound binder, heavier than it looked. Monica set it on Rita's desk as though it were evidence in a trial. Sharon hovered close, her eyes sharp, curious but reverent. Monica flipped it open, page by page. This is the complete review. 10 years of balance sheets, traced line by line. There's one detail I've kept quiet until now. Her pen tapped a column marked Capital Injections, Personal Funds. The figures climbed like rungs on a ladder. $50,000 here, $75,000 there. Rita knew the numbers by heart. She'd written those checks in silence, each one a piece of her own savings. Monica's voice carried through the stillness. Total, $600,000. Without those injections, this company would have collapsed in 2015. The liquidity crisis would have shut the doors. Sharon let out a low whistle, flipping back through the early pages. All this time. She closed the binder gently, as though it might burn. They thought they were carrying the legacy. Turns out, they were carried by it. Rita rested her hands over her husband's watch, the metal cool against her skin. Her voice was quiet, but steady. They lived off my shadow. Sharon's gaze met hers, firm as steel. That shadow built the roof over their heads. The revelation spread through the boardroom like wildfire once Monica circulated the report. Members who had once hesitated to take sides now looked at Rita with something closer to awe. 600,000 wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that when everyone else assumed she had faded into retirement, she had been quietly holding the company's spine straight. Monica sealed the point in her calm, surgical way. She never took a salary after stepping down. Every dime she put in was hers, no repayment demanded, no credit taken. The silence that followed wasn't disbelief, it was shame. Shame that they had believed the narrative Derek and Tiffany spun, that Rita was a relic on the payroll. Rita sat through it without flinching. Let them stew. Truth didn't need embellishment. Later that week, the employees unveiled the mural. It had been painted quietly over the last month, a project whispered about in break rooms and lunch hours, hidden behind a sheet of tarp on the wall of the central atrium. When the covering was pulled away, the room hushed. The mural stretched across the wall in sweeping strokes, the company's history captured in paint. Trucks rolling out of a garage, rows of workers shipping boxes, screens glowing with logistics maps. In the center, not Derek, not Tiffany, not even her late husband, though his silhouette stood just behind her. At the heart of it all was Rita. Her likeness was painted not as a figure of grandeur, but as she was, composed, steady, hands folded over her watch. Behind her, the roof of the company rose high, sheltering the workers painted below. For a moment, Rita couldn't breathe. The atrium filled with silence so complete that the hum of the HVAC seemed deafening. Then the clapping began, soft at first, then swelling until it thundered against the glass walls. Employees crowded forward. Some had tears in their eyes. Others simply stood taller, as though the mural itself had handed them back their pride. Sharon leaned close, her voice low but fierce. You gave them the roof. Now they're giving you the walls to stand on. Rita blinked once, steadying herself, then lifted her chin. She didn't smile, not fully, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had walked through fire and still stood unburned. She whispered to herself, just loud enough for Sharon and Monica to hear. Legacy isn't inherited, it's built, brick by brick. The clapping swelled louder, rolling like thunder through the atrium. But beneath it, Rita knew the storm outside hadn't fully passed. Derek was still out there, Tiffany too, and neither would forgive humiliation quietly. The mural was a celebration, but also a line in the sand. The rooftop glittered again, the Dallas skyline burning gold against the December night. But this time, the air felt different. No tension humming beneath the laughter, no brittle smiles hiding knives. Just warmth, the kind that came when people knew the ground under their feet was steady. Rita stepped onto the deck, the cold breeze tugging at her silk wrap. A jazz trio played near the bar, soft enough for conversation. The tables were smaller this year, arranged in circles instead of rows, so no one sat on the margins. Edison bulbs strung across the railings gave the night a glow that felt more like home than spectacle. Employees greeted her as she moved through the crowd, not with nervous bows of the head, but with smiles, handshakes, the occasional hug. Someone slipped a homemade ornament into her hand, a glass ball with the company's founding year painted on it in gold. Thought you should have the first one, the young woman said shyly before disappearing back into the crowd. Rita held it carefully, her chest tightening in a way she hadn't expected. When the speeches began, there was no microphone scramble, no nervous shifting of eyes. Sharon stepped forward, a glass of champagne in her hand. The winter wind tugged at her hair, but her voice carried strong. To the founder, Sharon said, lifting her glass high. The fixer, the finisher. The crowd roared their approval, glasses clinking like a chorus. Rita caught Sharon's eye across the glow of the bulbs. The old CFO's gaze was fierce but proud, like she'd been waiting years to say those words aloud. Rita raised her own glass, but before she could speak, Monica appeared at her side, carrying a slim velvet box. She handed it over with a small nod. Inside was a plaque, etched clean and precise. Built, owned, defended. For a moment, Rita couldn't breathe. The metal gleamed under the rooftop lights, and in it she saw a reflection of everything they had fought through. Her husband's early faith, the years of sacrifice, the betrayal, the survival. Applause broke out as she held it aloft. Monica leaned close, her voice low but steady. No one can ever erase that again. Rita stepped forward then, the skyline glittering behind her. She let the noise quiet before she spoke, her tone calm but strong. Integrity never ages, she said. And neither does gratitude. You are the reason this company stands. And tonight, we celebrate not just what we've built, but what we'll build together. The words were simple, but the crowd erupted. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the rooftop. Music swelled again, couples drifting to the dance floor. The sharp edges of past years had been sanded away. Rita didn't need to say more. She simply watched, letting the joy belong to them. For the first time in years, she sat at the edge of the party and allowed herself to enjoy it. Sharon danced with two junior accountants, spinning them until they squealed with laughter. Monica stood near the bar, her usual cool veneer softened as she spoke with a cluster of department heads. Even the board members, who had once eyed her with caution, now mingled like guests at a family gathering. Someone uncorked a bottle of champagne too early, and the foam sprayed across the table, drawing cheers instead of reprimands. Rita smiled, sipping from her glass. This was the company she remembered, the one born in a garage, sustained not by greed or ego, but by grit and faith. She placed the plaque on the table beside her, the engraved words catching the glow of the Edison bulbs. Built, owned, defended. For the first time, she believed she could stop defending and start living again. As the music carried into the night, Rita's watch ticked steadily at her wrist. She touched it, feeling the pulse of her late husband's presence there. "I think you'd like this one," she whispered, her eyes lifting to the skyline. Finally, a party worth staying for. The crowd's laughter swelled behind her, bright and unburdened. But deep inside, Rita knew the final act was still ahead. The city was still asleep when Rita stepped out of her car. Dawn had barely broken, the skyline painted in pale blues and grays. Frost clung to the edges of the lobby glass, and when she pushed the doors open, the sound echoed like a cathedral bell. She paused there, in the vast entrance hall she had once sketched on a yellow pad at her kitchen table. Marble floors, steel columns, the company crest engraved into the wall. She had chosen every line, every finish, down to the placement of the lights that now glowed faintly in the early hour. For years she'd walked through here like a ghost. Now she stood tall, breathing it in. "This is mine," she whispered to the empty space, not as a boast, as a truth finally spoken aloud. By 8 o'clock, the building had filled with a different kind of energy. Dozens of employees, junior staff, interns, fresh hires, gathered in the atrium around a long oak desk, newly installed against the mural wall. A brass plate gleamed across the top. Rita's desk. The mentorship program she had dreamed about for years was finally real. Each quarter, a select group would sit here, shadow her, learn not just numbers and strategy, but the quiet art of resilience. Rita took her seat for the inaugural session. The young faces before her were nervous, wide-eyed. She folded her hands, her late husband's watch glinting under the lights. "This company was born in a garage," she began softly. "No one believed it would stand, but we believed. And that belief, brick by brick, built the roof you now stand under. That is your inheritance, not titles, not shortcuts. Integrity, hard work. That's what you'll learn here." Pen scribbled, eyes widened. For the first time in decades, she saw the future of the company and didn't feel fear. She felt certainty. Later that afternoon, Monica arrived in her precise navy suit, a folder tucked under her arm. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a flicker of triumph. They've invited you to keynote at the National Logistics Conference, she said. Chicago, 3 months from now. Theme is Foundations and Futures. They want you to open it. Rita exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing gently against her chest. For years, she had been painted out of her own story. Now, the industry wanted her voice. Sharon, leaning in the doorway, added dryly, "You're about to become the matriarch they write textbooks about." Rita smiled faintly. "Or cautionary tales. Either way, it will be mine." That evening, as the offices quieted, Rita returned to her own desk. The room was tidy, her papers stacked neatly, the plaque from the holiday party shining against the lamplight. She opened the top drawer and pulled out a single folded sheet. The roast. Tiffany's handwriting, still bold. The words burned into memory, even if the ink had faded a little at the edges. To Rita, the leech of our house, always around, never earning a cent. Rita read it again. This time she laughed, not bitterly, lightly, almost musically. The kind of laugh that came not from pain, but from victory so complete it no longer needed explanation. She tucked the note into a small wooden drawer she had labeled in her own careful script, Reminders. As she closed the drawer, she whispered, just for herself, "Leech, huh?" Her fingers brushed her husband's watch. She thought of the nights in the garage, of the checks she wrote in silence, of the boardroom battles and rooftop humiliations. And she thought of the employees clapping beneath the mural, their voices rising like a promise. She rose, walked to the window, and looked out over Dallas glowing in the twilight. At the company party, my daughter-in-law called me the leech of our house. Little did she know I built the walls she thought she ruled. The city lights blinked back at her, steady as her resolve. And for the first time in years, Rita felt not just like the survivor of a war, but the architect of a future no one could take from her again.